Okay, friends, we are going to get started. Shalom, shalom. Josh Haston here, coming to you live from Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I'm here just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. Thanks so much for joining us here for this webinar presented by American Friends of Judea and Samaria, AFJS, with Avi Abelow, MK Boaz Bismuth, and Israel Gantz. The head of the Esha Council was supposed to be meeting with us, but he is actually at this very minute right now meeting with the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. He was called in, so he will not be able to join us on this webinar. Today's event is being held in memory of Tanya Gorlin of blessed memory, a strong defender of Israel, a true friend and ambassador for Judea and Samaria. Tanya gave much support to the State of Israel, our soldiers, and especially AFJS from her community in Boston. Over the past 2 years, she organized several events in her hometown and hosted representatives of Judea and Samaria. And exactly 1 year ago, Tanya hosted us at a special event where Margot Einstein celebrated her 100th birthday and chose to donate to the Yesha Council and AFJS. Thanks to Tanya. Her uncompromising love for Israel and Judea and Samaria will be greatly missed. We will do our best, folks, to continue her legacy by connecting people to Judea and Samaria. Today's event is just one example of the many activities and events organized by AFJS. We are a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to increasing knowledge and sharing the truth about the Israeli communities of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley to the general public. If you are not yet a member of the organization, go to afjs.org and join our movement today. Also, don't forget to sign up for the AFJS Strategic Impact Tour with Eve Harrow on Wednesday, August the 7th. If you're here in Israel, register via our website. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them in the chat. You can send them privately to me, Josh Haston. We will get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And let's turn right now. Let's go to the Knesset, where MK Boaz Bismuth, I believe, is just stepped out of a Knesset session to join us today. He is going to discuss how to combat the fake news against Israel, a member of Knesset from the Likud party. Thank you so much for joining us, MK Bismuth.
No, you are in mute. Just a minute.
Just 1 second. We're going to unmute you here. There
Am
we
I
go. Please.
Can you
Sorry
hear
about
me?
that. Now we can hear you. Go right ahead. MK Bismuth, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for hosting me. In fact, not one meeting, but 3 meetings at the Foreign Affairs and the Security Committee. Many things are going on. But I hope that those things will lead us to what we all are looking for and seeking for, which is victory for Israel. But it's going to be, one has to be very patient. Now, I read here that it's American Friends of Judea and Samaria. I would call it, in short, American Friends of Israel. This is the best response you have to the ICJ. I mean, me like you on Friday of this weekend, I entered Shabbat, hearing that I have no connection. I mean, so no connection. I mean, my presence in East Jerusalem or in the West Bank is illegal. And it brought me back to 2016, the period where I was a journalist, not an MK. And I recall at the time in Paris, there is this very important institution called UNESCO. UNESCO, as you know, a UN institution for, of course, culture, etc., etc. And UNESCO decided in 2016, and many countries voted for that resolution, including a country like France, who knows history, who knows culture, who has the Louvre Museum. Well, in 2016, they voted a resolution that Jews have no connection to Jerusalem. Unbelievable. UNESCO for culture for the world. And why do I say that? Because they said, I mean, that we have no a connection whatsoever to Jerusalem, including to the wall, to the Kotel Maravi, and of course to the Mount Temple. Now, in fact, I mean, I remember that time I was editor-in-chief. I was making the newspaper. I was very, very angry. But between you and me, did it change a wee bit in our attitude towards Jerusalem? Of course not. I mean, they said.
I think he dropped off the line there. Let's try to get him back on. Apologize for the technical issue there, but let's get the MK back on if we can. Looks like the Knesset is having some internet issues right now.
Just a minute, Joss. We check what's happened.
In the meantime, we have a message here. Let's see if I can get to the message. On behalf of Tanya Gorland's family, I wish to thank AFJS for dedicating this webinar to her memory. Israel was a big part of Tanya's life, and supporting the people of Judea and Samaria was very important to her. Big greetings to all her friends in Judea and Samaria. That is from Andrew Gorland in the United States. Thanks so much, Andrew, and it's our honor to dedicate this webinar in her memory. So thank you so much for chatting in. There you go. We have the MK back on the line. If we can unmute him, please. 1 second. We're going to unmute him. There.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Technical issue. Go ahead.
So I don't know where you lost me, but I'll try to continue by saying you heard me till UNESCO, I guess, 2016 resolution. We have no connection whatsoever with Jerusalem, and we went on. Now you must understand, we live in a period, we live in a world right now, which is in a transition world. This is a transition, and each and any one of you, if there is one book you should read, is The World of Yesterday of Stefan Zweig. I'm not saying the two world wars are in front of us, but I'm saying that the world is changing right. And as it's a changing world, everybody has the liberty of just saying sometimes nonsense, like in this case, or not nonsense, trying their best. Now you must understand one thing. The best answer to the decision of the ICJ on Friday is exactly the same decision on 2016, by continuing, by doing exactly what is good for us. There are moments in the history of a nation, and I'm someone, on the contrary, very realistic, very grounded. I listen to what the world says, but there are moments in our history where you have to listen with all due respect to ourselves. These are moments we have to listen to Israelis. These are moments we have to listen to the heart of our nation, to our soul. This is a moment we have to listen also to to our fathers. This is the moment where we have to listen to the inheritance we have received. And not for nothing, people said that you write the future with the ink of the past. The ink of the past is Judea and Samaria. And without Judea and Samaria, there is no future for the Jewish people. And this is something you must understand. And how funny, how awkward, how bizarre, how strange that the same decision of ICJ coincides exactly with what you hear in demonstrations in Columbia University, for example. And I'll explain. From the river to the sea, meaning not only Judea and Samaria or my presence in East Jerusalem is illegal, but all my presence in this land, also in Tel Aviv where I live. And those who did not understand that understood nothing. And this is why the best response is people like me who live in Tel Aviv, who about 4 years ago took a decision to take my wife and kids and to have our vineyards in Eli and to go and work the land every fortnight or every 3-4 weeks. And this is the best answer I have to ICJ, because you must understand the same policy of step after step. First of all, you deny my presence in Judea and Samaria, and believe me, after that, you deny your presence in all of Israel. And this is why it may be when I heard it on the weekend, it annoyed me. But when I went for the Kiddush on Shabbat, it only made me stronger. And the first thing I will do on Tuesday is go with my family to Eli and say that the same way in Tel Aviv, nobody has any question about my presence there, exactly the same in Eli. And between you and me, what a beautiful place. What a beautiful place.
Thank you so much to MK Boaz Bismuth for taking the time in the midst of very, very important meetings at the Knesset. Thanks so much for joining us. Avi Abelow, if you're not familiar with Avi Abelow, he has been at the forefront of the media war on behalf of Israel for many, many years. He's the editor of the Pulse of Israel platform, the Israel Unwired news site, and he is chairman of the 12 Tribe Films Foundation, dedicated to producing and promoting creative projects about the Jewish people and the land of Israel by providing the inspiring, politically incorrect truth. Abelow lives in Efrat in Gush Etzion, married with 4 kids. 2 are currently fighting in Gaza. Abelow himself has served in the IDF military reserves during the current conflict, during the war, and is waiting to return in the not too distant future to defending the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Avi, it's an honor to have you here on our AFJS webinar.
Shalom, Josh and Yigal. Thank you so much for having me. Very much appreciate being on your program, and obviously a very, very big supporter of everything you guys are doing with AFJS.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it very much. And we appreciate your time, which is extremely valuable. And let's get right to it. The MK Boaz Bismuth talked a lot about the International Court of Justice. And if you haven't heard the news over the weekend, I'll just briefly summarize here. We're talking about the principal judicial arm of the United Nations located in The Hague. They issued a non-binding 83-page opinion on Friday declaring Israeli so-called occupation of Judea and Samaria to be unlawful. The court reaffirmed that the Israeli, what they call settlements, what we call communities in Judea and Samaria and parts of Jerusalem and the regime associated with them have been established and are being maintained in violation of international law. This again, according to the UN High Court. Avi, let's hear your take on what does this mean? Does it have any relevance towards us? What is this all about, the ICJ ruling?
Great question, Josh. I mean, it could be broken down into a couple of different levels. Level number one is how it highlights the absolute joke of what has become of international law and the international organizations. I mean, anyone with eyes in his head knows that this is the Jewish ancestral homeland. You go back to the Bible. We're the longest, the people with the longest connection to this land. The only people in the world with a 3,000 plus year connection to this land. You cannot be an occupier in your own homeland. So we're talking about the absolute hypocrisy and the outing of the international community as being totally unreliable and not having anything to do with justice, but about injustice, which again is something important that I talk about in my Pulse of Israel programs all the time, that it's part of the wake-up process that people have to wake up and realize. I mean, for too many years, Jews, and especially Jews in Israel, we've put so much focus on caring about what the world says and what the world thinks about what we do in our own homeland. Should we attack? Should we not attack? Should we build a community in Judea and Samaria? Should we not build a community in Judea and Samaria? It's like, how long and what is necessary to happen in order for more and more Jews to wake up and realize that it's not about justice, it's not about truth, it's not about human rights, it's not about equality. It's about an agenda to weaken and potentially even destroy the Jewish state of Israel. It never has been about any sort of justice. And actually, just to give everyone some information, some weapons on how to deal with this latest ICJ ruling, there's actually a great post that was put up by Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch, and I can share the link with anyone afterwards. And it's saying, knowing how to defend Israel from the International Court of Justice. And I'll give it just a few of these pieces of factual information dealing with international law. Again, putting aside the fact that this is the Jewish homeland, and you can't deny that. I mean, anyone who says that a Jew can be able to live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, or Bethlehem, Texas, but yet it's forbidden for a Jew to live in Bethlehem, Israel, where King David was born. It makes no logic whatsoever. But let's put that aside, and now let's deal with the actual international law. And as Itamar Marcus writes here, it's fact number one: United Nations Resolutions 242 and 338 affirm Israel's right under international law to administer all of what is today called Area C in Judea and Samaria, where Israelis live. Okay, so he's saying straight out, according to international law, we have every right to be living here. Fact number two: the Oslo Accord, signed between Israel and the PLO, again back in 1993, reaffirmed Israel's right to administer all of Area C in Judea and Samaria. Fact number three: United Nations Resolution 242 and the Oslo Accords do not require Israel to withdraw to new borders that do not guarantee Israel's security. And again, just fact after fact after fact, even according to international law, Israel has every right to be building communities and for Jews to be able to live in Judea and Samaria. So again, we're just showing the exposure of the hypocrisy of the international organizations and the International Court of Justice specifically as having nothing to do with justice and being used as an ideological tool, weapon in order to harm the Jewish people and assist the Palestinian Authority, which is an enemy of Israel's, in our ultimate destruction. So it's important that people understand all of that and realize that do not be depressed based on these headlines. And again, even though this International Court of Justice ruling is non-binding, what it does allow is for the United Nations, or the Security Council specifically of the United Nations, to decide on implementing sanctions on Israel because we live in Judea and Samaria. And again, me personally, proud to be a proud Jewish resettler in our ancestral homeland, living in the community of Efrat. So that might happen. I don't know whether in a week or a month or in a few months' time, or possibly definitely before election time in America, there might be a vote up to sanction Israel. And might be horrible sanctions or very painful sanctions. But again, we all have to realize what's going on is a wake-up process for Jews and Jews in Israel, especially, to realize we can no longer fake ourselves or lie to ourselves that we have to rely on the international community or the international organizations or justice organizations to think that they're anything really about justice. It's really all about injustice. At the end of the day, the Jewish people, we have to stand up and do what we must do to stand up for our rights in our ancestral homeland and defend ourselves, regardless of whatever criticism may come from the international community.
Thanks, Avi. And you mentioned a wake-up call, and October the 7th was certainly a horrible wake-up call here in Israel, to put it mildly. Hamas used the territory which Israel gave up in Gaza in 2005 and built a jihadist terror base. They waited patiently for years and carried out the worst massacre of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. What can we learn from October the 7th as it pertains to Israel's presence in Judea and Samaria?
That's a great question, Josh. First of all, even before touching upon Judea and Samaria, I quickly want to touch upon the main lesson that most Israelis, I'd say a majority of Israelis, woke up to after the horrific Simchat Torah October 7th massacre. And that is when they finally internalized that our enemies have not been killing us over these 100 years because of where we live. They kill us because of who we are, because we're Jews. October 7th, the horrific terrorists did not ask a Jew, are you a religious Jew? Are you not a religious Jew? Are you a settler? Are you not a settler? They killed everyone, which is what they've been doing for decades. And that really, even though to you and me, we've all known this for forever, but to many Israelis, that was a wake-up call, because they really believed, oh, if only we're not living in Judea and Samaria, if only we give away Judea and Samaria to our enemies, then and finally we have a border and there's a two-state solution, then we'll be able to live in peace. And it was a big wake-up call where, believe it or not, a nice percentage of those massacred and kidnapped on October 7th are some from the political left, who are some of the biggest people who supported removing us Jews from Judea and Samaria. And it was a big, big wake-up call for many Israelis to finally internalize it has nothing to do with where we live. No matter what we would do, even if we would pull out of Judea and Samaria, our ancestral lands here, they would still be continuing to kill us elsewhere in our ancestral homeland, the modern state of Israel. So that is wake-up call number one that definitely many Jews in Israel woke up to, and I imagine some Jews around the world. I would love to be able to say many, I don't know. In terms of specifically for us, Judea and Samaria, I mean, I can talk personally to this because I was immediately called up to my reserve unit on October 7th. I mean, I went to shul for mincha time for the afternoon prayers on Simchat Torah on October 7th. I didn't even get to open up my prayer book, my Siddur, and I got a message on my phone because, again, since the morning of October 7th, the second I heard about the attack and the invasion, I was already on my phone waiting to be called up. My son was called up in the morning. I had another son waiting to be called up. So we're all already on our phones throughout the holiday of Simchat Torah, starting early in the morning, knowing the massacre was taking place. And again, so I was immediately called up in the afternoon to start patrolling the hills of Gush Etzion, of the Judean hills, of Judea and Samaria, because we were already on alert, understanding, wait a second, if they just did this from Gaza, they could be doing this anywhere in Judea and Samaria. And my unit was basically patrolling the hills of Gush Etzion, the Judean hills, as a full unit until a month or two ago, meaning for 7 months, we were on alert, just in case they would try, our enemies also in Judea and Samaria, would use their guns and all of a sudden try to invade or attack our communities of Gush Etzion. And understand, I proudly live with tens of thousands of other proud Jews resettling our ancestral homeland, the Judean hills, and we are surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Arabs. And I would never want to live anywhere else, but we have to understand the reality that we're living in. And based on that reality, we know, just as what happened on October 7th, that Hamas terrorists infiltrated from Gaza, so too, the hundreds of thousands of Arab Muslims who live in Bethlehem, which is right across the road from Efrat, could just pick up hundreds of them, thousands of them, and attack my community of Efrat. And again, so we were on alert, patrolling until around a month or two ago. And now we're not on alert as much as we were. But the situation is that many Jews in Judea and Samaria understand this is our reality. We can no longer dismiss this reality. And the solution is, one, continuing to live in Judea and Samaria, continue to build up Judea and Samaria, and continue to be on alert everywhere. And people have to understand it's not just Judea and Samaria, because the communities attacked from the Gaza invasion were the communities on the Gaza border. Today, you have towns and cities that are just within 2-3 miles of Judea and Samaria, especially up in the Samaria area. The city of Netanya, the city of Kfar Saba, they're within a 5-minute drive from some of the major Arab cities in Samaria. So if they would decide one day to attack Jews, they're not just going to be attacking us resettlers in Judea and Samaria. They're going to be going over and attacking Jews in Kfar Saba and in Netanya and in other locations as well. So it's a really big wake-up call for Jews today to understand this is a reality we can no longer ignore. And again, in my programming on the Pulse of Israel, I try to wake people up to this, because when I tell people that we shouldn't be calling this the Gaza war, because this is really the 77th year of our war of independence. The war of independence never ended. We deluded ourselves to believe, oh, that war ended in 1948. Oh, there was another war in 1967. Oh, there was another war in 1973. Oh, there was the Lebanon war. No, we are still fighting the same war 77 years in. Every little time the battle is just coming from a different direction, or the leaders or the bodies fighting us might be under different names, but it's the same Arab Muslim enemy entity out to destroy the Jewish state of Israel. And we're now 77 years into this battle. And I'm positive that we will win this battle, but a big component in winning is as many Jews as possible waking up to reality and no longer deluding ourselves to believe that there is a peace partner, no longer deluding themselves to believe that the two-state solution is a solution where it's really a delusion, and realizing that we are now experiencing a fusion of spirituality and reality. Why do I say that? Because again, for many years, the Jews who believed in us living in Judea and Samaria, we'd always use the claim of the Torah, the Bible. Well, it's our land. God gave us the land. Of course, we should be able to live in Judea and Samaria. And many people are like, oh, well, don't trust the Torah, and you're not being realistic, and it's not, and the world doesn't care. Today, we, the Jewish people in Israel, know in order to defend ourselves, we must live in Judea and Samaria. It's not just because God told us we must live here that it's our homeland, but in order to protect all of Israel, the Jewish people must have a strong presence throughout Judea and Samaria. And I'm going to throw Gaza in there as well. That is the only way we could protect all of Israel and all Israelis, not just Jewish Israelis, but Arab Israelis, Christian Israelis, Muslim Israelis, Druze. We must have a strong presence in Judea and Samaria, as big a presence as possible, in order to have a strong and positive future for the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel. Hence, I'm saying we're seeing the fusion of spirituality and reality. It's no longer just a spiritual claim, oh, Jews must live there because God gave us the land, and the Bible stories took place in Judea and Samaria, so of course we should be able to live there. But it's also realistic. The only realistic path to a safe and secure future for the Jewish state of Israel is a strong and prosperous presence of Jews throughout Judea and Samaria.
Avi, I certainly agree with you. We definitely have to have a strong presence in Judea and Samaria. And by the way, you mentioned how close the proximity is from some of those communities which Arabs live in Judea and Samaria, and places in call it pre-1967 Israel. They were already shooting into those towns and communities. So we're already seeing that. And we've experienced that over the last 9 months as well. And I want to ask you a technical question now. With that hope that we maintain a strong presence, there's another battle going on a day-to-day basis. And I'm talking about for the past 15 years, the Arabs live in Judea and Samaria, have been building. They've been building illegally, specifically in Area C, and that's the area fully controlled by Israel, both militarily and from a municipal perspective. They're taking over strategic pieces of land. This is supposed to be under Israeli control, and their goal is to create a de facto PA state. And you can go online and you can look up the 2009 Fayad plan, which they state this publicly. It's available online. Their goal is to take over these strategic pieces of land. Talk about that threat of the illegal Arab building in Area C.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk to it as a witness, because again, Josh, you and I both live in Gush Etzion. I live in Efrat in Gush Etzion, right? And anyone, I don't know how many people who are watching this video have ever been to Gush Etzion or to Efrat, but right outside the northern entrance to Efrat, they are building illegally. I remember when there were no Arab homes there whatsoever, and it's Israeli state land. Any Arabs are not allowed to build there. If anything, Jews should be able to build there. A road is supposed to be built there to connect different Jewish communities in the Gush Etzion area. That today is impossible because they've built, and strategically have built, illegal Arab homes along that area. So we can't build a road there. The only way we can connect communities there is now if we develop a tunnel underneath, which is insane because it's Jewish state land. In order to connect Jewish communities, we should be able to build a road there, but we can't because of all the illegal Arab building that, unfortunately, the Jewish state of Israel has not yet made the decision to get rid of according to law. So we see this outside of our gates of Efrat, and they build right up to our edges. This is throughout Judea and Samaria. They strategically they are doing this, and it is a very, very big problem. And the biggest problem, it's not even that they're doing it. The biggest problem is that the official state of Israel and the army, which is in charge of stopping illegal actions like this from taking place in Judea and Samaria, they have never taken action to stop this illegal land grab. I mean, how many people here know about I'm trying to remember the name of the village down near Ma'ale Adumim. It's escaping me right now.
Khan al-Ahmar.
Right? That's been there for like 20 years. It's gone through Supreme Court case after Supreme Court case, meaning Israeli law is clear. It is illegal. But again, and it's because of international pressure. I mean, when you go back to the other question earlier about the International Court of Justice, even though according to Israeli law and according to Israel's Supreme Court that community must be destroyed, the international world always puts pressure on Israeli governments. Don't you dare destroy that illegal town, which is insane. I mean, the international community is going against law when it comes to Israel. So it's a very big problem, but I want to give the positive. The positive is that right now we are dealing with the first government that is finally taking action regarding Jewish state land in Area C, meaning all of Area C in Judea and Samaria, thanks really to our finance minister and a sort of minister in the defense ministry, Bezalel Smotrich. I mean, just recently, he has come up with various decisions that have been approved by the government that are now allowing the Minhal in Judea and Samaria to finally take control over lands, to stop the illegal building, destroy illegal building, unlike thousands and thousands of dunam of land in Judea and Samaria in Area C, that until now, even though it should have been done, it was never done. But finally, we have a government making the necessary decisions to ensure that hopefully it gets done with the right powers empowered to do so. So it's a huge problem. And again, the world allows, I don't know how many people know, it's not just the world allows the Palestinian Authority to make this land grab and build thousands and thousands of illegal homes, but it's the European Union and European governments who are supposedly our allies that are funding this illegal land grab. And again, I don't have the data to show you right now, and I guess anyone interested, Josh, I'm sure we could find them the data. And I know investigative journalist Edwin Black specifically came up with a whole investigation, and he found all the billions and billions of dollars coming from European governments and the EU going to the Palestinian Authority for this land grab and this and this illegal buildup across Judea and Samaria. So people have to understand the war against us in Israel, and specifically in Judea and Samaria, it's an international war. Again, you're talking about billions of dollars from our allies in Europe that are behind this in order to create a de facto Palestinian state that we all know is about replacing the Jewish state of Israel, not to live side by side with us in peace. So, I mean, one big issue that I have, even with our leaders, is that because of international diplomacy, they can't even say this out loud. Our enemy is not just Hamas. Our enemy is not just the Palestinian Authority. Our enemy is not just Qatar. It's not just Iran, but it's even allies of ours who work hand in hand with our enemies. What do you call that? Well, they're not called allies. And that's an issue that is hardly spoken about. And we have yet the leaders to call out publicly. It's not just hypocrisy, but evil from our allies in the world who are literally working hand in hand towards the destruction of Israel while pretending to be allies of ours. And that is a deeper reality that we still need everyone to understand. And again, I want people to understand this, not to be depressed about it, but to be invigorated and optimistic about it, because ultimately our future is up to us. And it's the empowerment of the Jewish people owning and strengthening our Jewish identity and our presence here, continuing it, because we are a miraculous people. We have to stop thinking, oh, the world won't let us. Why do I care what the world thinks if the world is helping towards our destruction? Those powers are not trustworthy. We have to do what we have to do, and then we'll deal with the world. But because we're always so afraid of what the world will say, what the world will think, this decision, that decision, we're only giving in and allowing our self-destruction. And again, I think October 7th, and now I say thank you to the International Court of Justice for exposing itself, because it's waking up more people to understand and come to this realization. We have to stop thinking about what the world will say and start focusing on what we need to do regardless.
So, Avi, you mentioned that steps are being taken by the current government and specifically Minister Smotrich in order to prevent the illegal takeover of state lands. And by the way, thank you to Hugh, who mentioned that who's watching right now, the Regavim organization has all the data on the illegal building taking place in Area C. I mean, what would you say to people watching from, wherever they are around the world in terms of what they can do on a practical level, those of us who are not in the government, in order to raise awareness about the issue and how dangerous it is, the illegal building in Area C, and how they're trying to form this contiguous state, essentially, in specific strategic areas, from here to from Jerusalem, where I am, to the Dead Sea, from north to south. What can anybody do out there who really wants to help make a difference, who's not part of the government?
Yeah, great question, Josh. So there are two different levels of what people can do. Level number one is just awareness, is being part of sharing the information, sharing the facts, so that more of our friends, of our neighbors, of our community, of organizations, that they are familiar with the facts. And it's by following the information that's being put out by AFJS, following information being put out by Regavim, following information that I put out from Pulse of Israel, also with this information, and on my news website, Israel Unwired, getting people plugged in with the factual information and sharing that factual information. That's on the awareness. In terms of actually helping those of us on the ground, well, the best way is to actually support the strengthening of our hold on land in Judea and Samaria, whether that is actually physically donating towards efforts of communities in Judea and Samaria, or specifically donating towards those efforts of the farms in Judea and Samaria. Because while I live in Efrat and you live in Elazar, and which are established communities with homes, we only have a finite area where we can live. And the effort being done right now in Judea and Samaria to hold on to as much land as possible is actually the farms. And you're talking about young families or young men and young women who are literally risking their lives being on hilltops with no electricity, whether in a tent or in a caravan, and holding on to thousands of acres of land by acting as farmers and holding on to that land and being the front line against the Arabs taking over that land. They are the front line for the whole Jewish people and the whole freedom-loving world, just by living in those farms. So any and all support for all of those farms out there and those Jews, young Jews, families on the front line holding down the fort or holding down these farms, that is a huge, huge way to be able to support the strengthening of our hold in Judea and Samaria, to be able to protect all of Israel, all Israelis, and again, understanding we are the front line of the whole freedom-loving world against this Islamist revolution to destroy the whole world. Well, that's the front line of the whole freedom-loving world. It's Judea and Samaria, and specifically the farms in Judea and Samaria holding on to these lands.
Yeah, they certainly are the modern day pioneers of the Zionist movement and the state of Israel and the Jewish people. No doubt about that. Avi, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to leave it open to questions and answers if there's time. This past week, in a symbolic move, the Knesset voted overwhelmingly against the establishment of a Palestinian Authority entity between the river and the sea, against a Palestinian so-called state. I think it was 69 or 68 to 9 or whatnot, other than the Arab parties, and I think maybe Labor, everyone else, including the left of center, the center, and the right, they all voted against the establishment of a so-called Palestinian state, as opposed to a previous vote where it was the issue of we are against unilaterally allowing the establishment of a Palestinian state. In this case, in this vote, it was we are against the Israeli people as represented by our people in the Knesset. Our government officials said they are against the establishment of a PA state. How significant was this week's decision in the Knesset?
That's a great question. I'll answer it like this. It's significance on two different levels. First of all, in the awareness level of the Israeli people, that our Knesset, which again, it's beyond the coalition, because you even had, as you mentioned, parties from the opposition, including Benny Gantz's party, voting against ever recognizing a Palestinian state. And that's huge on making a statement for the Israeli government to be making this statement for the Israeli people first and foremost. The second level of its importance is just in the international diplomacy. Again, this vote was taken specifically now before Prime Minister Netanyahu is about to fly to Washington, D.C. to speak to both houses of Congress and potentially meet President Biden, whether he's sick or stepping down, who knows? But in any case, it was a symbolic vote here in Israel before this trip in order to give Netanyahu the public backing to not fall into any pressure that he might be pressured by President Biden or the Biden administration when he is there for this visit. Because again, ever since October 7th, we have been witness to the insane push of the Biden administration to try to solve the war by ending it with the establishment of a Palestinian state, which makes no sense whatsoever to anyone who uses their mind. Because if anything, the Israeli people woke up October 7th realizing we can never allow for the establishment of a state called Palestine on our borders because they just want to kill us and destroy the Jewish state of Israel and kill all Jews. But for whatever reason, without getting into this right now, that was the diplomatic plan of the Biden administration and our other Western European allies. They wanted to end the war in order to set up and establish a state called Palestine. So the pressure is still there, even though it's not being heard as much as was a number of months ago. But in any case, this vote, it was a way of the Israeli people via our representatives in Knesset in giving Netanyahu the legal and public backbone to be able to tell the Biden administration, guys, it doesn't make a difference. Even if I wanted to do it, I can't because our own parliament voted against this. They don't even try pressuring me to make it happen. So that is the importance of that vote. Does it mean that if the world pressures and forces that it could still happen? Of course, but that's not what it's about. It was about empowering Prime Minister Netanyahu and empowering the Jewish people, not just the Jewish people in Israel, but all the Jewish people, hopefully if they hear about it, to understand that the people of Israel, the Jewish people in Israel, we will never allow for the establishment of a state called Palestine.
Amen to that. And Avi, thank you so much for your analysis. We are going to now open it up to questions and answers. If anybody has any questions, feel free to send them in on the chat. We'll start with Adam, who is asking, are there global partners you've identified that might be able to galvanize our brothers and sisters, give them, in quotes, permission to think of a broader Israel? He's talking about broader Israel, meaning the establishment of Jewish sovereignty, even mentions over Shem, where biblical Joseph is buried. Are there global partners, Avi, who are pushing this?
Wow. Well, if you're talking about global partners in terms of other governments, no, but it is an interesting direction because I'm a big believer. Again, I haven't had a chance to personally talk to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but if I would get into his head, one of the things I could tell that he did different than all other prime ministers before him is he developed stronger diplomatic relations with other world powers. Whereas before him, all governments relied on the dual relationship of Israel and America, and that was it. And it was Netanyahu who realized, like, one day America might not be as strong as it is today, or this was even back in the 1990s when Netanyahu first came into power. And he's the one that really started the development of relations with other world powers, like India, like China, like Russia. Again, understanding that some world powers are not as good as other world powers, but us as Israel, a tiny country, we can't rely on an alliance with only one country. And again, even though America is the best ally the modern Jewish state of Israel has ever had, this war has proven Netanyahu to be correct. Because here, our strongest ally, that Israel basically signed away the ability to only receive weapons from America. Well, in the middle of a war, the Biden administration was withholding weapons from us while we're fighting an existential war. Israel cannot be in that situation ever again. We must be able to have bilateral relations with other countries so that no one country can withhold weapons and then us being beholden and having to give in and appease in order to receive those weapons. So Netanyahu had that thinking. So it is possible, for instance, with a strengthening of a relationship with India, for instance, for example, that we can have the global partners, or Hungary, or other countries out there that do support Israel, as opposed to the Western democratic countries that should be our natural allies, but are instead have basically turned on us, whether publicly or under the radar, working against us. That's on the diplomatic level. Without the diplomatic level, I'm a big believer that while people might say that the governments are against the Jewish state of Israel, I still believe most people in the world support us. Most people in the world are common sense people, and they as many Christians in the world, and they support the Jewish people and our return and the Jewish state of Israel. That we can't be brainwashed by the headline news in the media every day, which sounds as if the whole world is against us. I don't believe that's true. While governments might be against us and always working against us, I believe a majority of the people are for us. And hence, on a public level, the more we stand up for our rights and the need for the Jewish people to have sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and I'm going to add Gaza as well, the more we talk about it, the more we educate the people on the ground everywhere, not just in America or in Britain or in France or in Germany, but in China and in India and in Australia and in Hungary, the more of an effort we do on educating the masses, and not via the mainstream media, but via our own channels, then yeah, we will be developing the public support for and the understanding for why it is the right, just, and moral thing for the Jewish people to have sovereignty in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think you did very well. Question from Svetlana, and again, I don't know if you have the answer to this question. She wants to know how to help directly donate to the farms in Judea and Samaria. Perhaps that's something we can discuss offline. I don't know if you have an answer to that right now. Maybe you do.
I don't have an answer to that right now, but I'm sure, Svetlana, by being in touch with Yigal and Josh, that they'll be able to put you in the right direction for those organizations doing that.
We'll move on. Thanks, Avi. We'll move on to Alex. Shouldn't official Israeli communications refer to Judea and Samaria as Judea and Samaria instead of the fake, as he writes here, West Bank? How can we make some change there, Avi? How can we get our own, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and people in our own government refer to Judea and Samaria as its authentic name? What can we do?
That's a great question, Alex. And again, the most important thing that you and I can do is make sure that all the time we use the correct language. And it's not just about that. It's not calling them Palestinians, because no such people called historic people called Palestinians. West Bank is created. All these terms are created in order to delegitimize our connection to our homeland. That's it. And it's very unfortunate that that members of the Israeli government, not as much the politicians, but bureaucrats in many of these offices, and especially journalists, continue to use these terms. And some of them do it because they ideologically believe in it, because they're against us living in Judea and Samaria. So they want to go according to the fake narrative that we don't belong here. So it makes them more comfortable saying West Bank and calling them Palestinians. Or it's because they're people of our own who know that it's not true, but they just gave up the words war. They're like, everyone uses the term, so I have to use the term. And I can't tell you, and Josh, I'm sure you agree, you understand this as well, because I write articles for the press. And depending upon the outlet, an outlet will say, no, we have to use the term West Bank because everyone uses it, so we can't use the term Judea and Samaria. And I'm like, are you crazy? You're basically just giving in and not even putting up a fight or trying to make a change. So the change is really up to us. And the change at the government level, it has to come down, again, it's up to us. We have to have public campaigns protesting in a sense and complaining that they're using fake terminology that delegitimizes our rights to our own ancestral homeland, so that they get the message. But the deeper problem is, and this is for a different program totally, because it's a much bigger issue to talk to, is that there are people in power who are, and again, not just politicians, but bureaucrats, who are ideologically set against us living in Judea and Samaria, and they use their positions in their career government jobs to do everything they can to harm our presence, the Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria. And that's a bigger struggle altogether, how we expose that and how we change that. But we all have to recognize and acknowledge that that exists as well. And it's not just the government employees who are bureaucrats, but it's also the Israeli justice system. Because unfortunately, according to Israel, even Israel's Supreme Court, we are official occupiers in Judea and Samaria. So any journalist or government state employee who wants to go according to the official legal language of the state of Israel, unfortunately, our own Supreme Court treats us as occupiers, and hence they use that terminology. So it's an uphill battle. But again, if we're talking about you and me, well, we have the power to ensure that whenever we talk and we write and we correct people to use the correct language, Judea and Samaria, Arab Muslims, not Palestinians, and not to give up in the language war, because culture is defined based on the language people use. And the fact that so many Jews gave up and they're just, oh, everyone uses it, I have to use it. No, you basically surrendered in order for us to win the culture war and the narrative of truth, of the true Jewish story. This is our ancestral homeland. We are the only ones with a right to live here with our own state between the river and the sea. We must be on the offensive also in using the correct language. It's up to us.
Thank you for the question, Alex. And Alex follows up by saying the Knesset should pass a law to restore the truthful and historical vocabulary. And I agree with Alex, absolutely. We're going to get to one last question here, Avi, from Fred, who refers to our previous discussion there on the Knesset vote. He says that despite the vote of the Knesset of never a Palestinian state, the world sees marches of Israelis. I believe he means people here marching, agreeing on creating a so-called Palestinian state. How do you stop it when Israelis themselves, again, obviously it's a minority at this point, for sure, there's no doubt about it, but there are still, and the media obviously overplays it and focuses on that, those who support, even after October 7th, a so-called Palestinian state. How do you stop it at this juncture, Avi?
Good question. First of all, I mean, we're all pretty well versed in life to know people see what they want to see. And unfortunately, there's always going to be a tiny minority in Israel who are delusional. they are delusional, not because they really think it brings peace, but it's more because of their anti-Jewish state agenda. They're more interested in Israel being a home for Israelis, like France is to French or British is to Britain, as opposed to this being the Jewish state with a strong Jewish value-based entity called the Jewish State of Israel, which means that Judea and Samaria is part of our Jewish state. So there's always going to be that small minority that exists here. And unfortunately, because the global agenda is to remove us from Judea and Samaria and allow this fake entity called Palestinian Arabs to have their own state, which is really about continuously trying to fight us and destroy us. So the world's always going to be looking and seeing those protests, even if it's just 5 people, they're still going to make the headline news somewhere around the world saying, oh, Israelis want a 2-state solution, meaning reality doesn't make a difference. They will read into reality what they want to read into. So we're never going to be able to stop the tiny minority from having the protests. We're never going to be able to stop the journalists with an agenda to stop writing according to their agenda. And we're never going to be able to stop the governments around the world to push their anti-Jewish state agenda as well, to weaken us and allow our enemy to be able to continue to kill us and try to destroy us. So again, my solution is up to us. And again,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, and again, I throw in I'm a religious believing Jew, and I throw in a little belief-based aspect to the conversation. We must remember, we are a miraculous people. Like, and I tell people when I talk to believing people, and especially Christians, I'm like, to me, one of the proofs that God exists is that the Jewish people exist. Because we shouldn't exist on any rational way whatsoever. Every generation, some entity comes up to destroy us. They always kill us, but yet we're still here and we keep on growing and we're thriving and we have our own Jewish state. We make no sense whatsoever. We're a miracle. We're a miracle and we're proof that God exists. The way we move forward is, again, based on something I was saying before, we stop thinking like we have to be realists and we start using Jewish realism. And that Jewish realism is we do what we have to do to strengthen ourselves and make the Jewish state of Israel, including Judea and Samaria and Gaza, under Israeli sovereignty, despite world pressure, and we will be able to stand up to it. And in a sense, God is waiting for us to do what we have to do, and then he's going to do what he has to do. But in the meantime, we're a living miracle. The existence of the state of Israel is miraculous. We're surrounded by billions of people who want to kill us every single day, and they try. And we've won every single war miraculously. The 1948 war, we won miraculously. 67, 70, we shouldn't be here. And yet we still are. And that's the belief-based component that we have to throw in. And I don't care how religious someone is or not. It doesn't make a difference. There is a power out there that is looking after us. And we have to hone into that power, be as realistic as possible in moving forward and strengthening our Jewish presence here in our ancestral homeland, including applying sovereignty as quickly as possible, as plenty of places as possible in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And we have to do so not being afraid of the world, but being faithful in the one above who is looking after us. And together with that partnership of us and the one above, we have a bright future. So that's the best message I can end with answering that question.
Amen to that. It's great to end on such positivity. Avi Abelow, the one and only, he's the editor of the Pulse of Israel platform, the Israel Unwired news site, chairman of 12 Tribe Films Foundation. He is very easy to find. All you have to do is go online and you can find Avi Abelow. And that's going to wrap it up. But just before, I want to thank everyone who participated. Thank you to everyone who's watching from all over the world. This has been another AFJS webinar. My name is Josh Haston, coming to you from Jerusalem. I'm literally just outside the walls of the old city of the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Make sure you go to afjs.org. If you are not yet a member, join us. Join this movement as we continue to spread the truth about Judea, Samaria, and all of Israel. Don't forget, August the 7th, we are going to be touring in the Binyamin area and the Shomron with Eve Harrow, the AFJS Strategic Impact Tour on August the 7th, Wednesday, August 7th. Make sure you register online on our website, afjs.org, and become a member today. Until next time, signing off from our eternal capital. Have a great week, everybody. Shavua Tov from Jerusalem.